A car door slammed somewhere behind them. Two more figures emerged from the shadows, moving in quietly, blocking the exit. Harris's grip on the revolver tightened. "That your idea of a conversation?" "No," the man said. "This is a warning. Next time I see you, it won't be this polite." The two men stopped a few feet away, waiting for a signal. Harris didn't back up. "Then maybe we shouldn't see each other again." The man studied him for a beat longer, then turned on his heel. The two others followed, melting back into it. The mist. Harris let out a slow breath. The encounter had been brief, but it told him everything. This wasn't just a crew-moving product. This was an organization, and they knew exactly who he was. He got back into his car, the seat creaking under his weight, and started the engine. The wipers smeared the mist into streaks, blurring the streetlights as he pulled away. He didn't head home. Instead, he took the long way across town, doubling back twice to make sure he wasn't being tailed. Eventually, he parked outside an all-night laundromat. The hum of dryers and the smell of detergent met him as he stepped inside. In the back corner, a man in a worn hoodie sat with a laptop, eyes scanning the screen. Harris dropped into the seat across from him. "I need a favor," Harris said. The man didn't look up. "How illegal?" "Let's just say, the kind that makes your hard drive cry." The hoodie man finally glanced up, a grin tugging at his lips. "All right, detective. What are we looking for?" Harris pulled out the folded note. "Last chance, Harris. I need to know where this came from, who printed it, and what else they've sent." The man's fingers began tapping across the keys. "Give me 20 minutes. Harris leaned back, scanning the laundromat's reflection in the glass door. A woman fed quarters into a dryer. A kid read a comic on the floor. Ordinary scenes that felt miles away from the warehouse's shadows. 20 minutes later, the hoodie man turned the laptop toward him. "It's not just a note, it's a pattern. Same font, same spacing, sent to at least 6 other people in the last year. What happened to them?" Harris asked. The grin faded. "You don't want to know?" Harris's jaw tightened. "I'm asking anyway. 3 vanished. 2 turned up dead. The last one, well, no one's seen him since he left the city." Harris pocketed the note again. "Then I guess I'm number 7. Hoodie man shook his head. "Or maybe you'll be the first to push back." Harris stood, dropping a couple of bills on the table. "Keep digging, and don't tell anyone you talk to me." The man raised a brow. "You expecting company?" Harris glanced out the window at a dark SUV idling across the street. Already here. The SUV across the street didn't move, but Harris could feel the eyes on him. He stepped out of the laundromat into the damp night, letting the door swing shut behind him. The street was quiet, only the hiss of tires on wet asphalt somewhere in the distance. Harris didn't go straight to his car. Instead, he walked toward the SUV at a steady pace. The tinted driver's window rolled down halfway, revealing a man with a shaved head and a scar running along his jaw. "Detective Harris," the man said, his voice low and deliberate. "You've got me at a disadvantage," Harris replied. "Good," the man said. "Saves time." The passenger door opened, and another man stepped out, taller, broader, carrying the kind of stillness that meant training. "Get in," Scarjaw ordered. Harris didn't move. "Not without dinner first." The tall man stepped closer, hand hovering near his jacket pocket. Harris raised both hands slightly. All right. He slid into the back seat. The door shut, the locks clicked, and the SUV pulled away from the curb. They drove in silence for several blocks, weaving through narrow streets until the cities. Lights gave way to the empty sprawl of the outskirts. Finally, they stopped in front of an abandoned riverside cannery, its broken windows staring down at the dark water. The tall man opened Harris's door and motioned him out. Inside, the cannery smelled of rust and stagnant water. A few lanterns cast pools of yellow light on the cracked concrete floor that at the far end of the room. The newcomer from the diner leaned against the support beam, arms crossed. "You just can't leave things alone, can you?" he said. "Not when they're this ugly," Harris replied. The man's eyes narrowed. "You're in over your head, detective. This isn't your case anymore. It's survival." Harris took a step forward. "Then I guess I'll survive." Scarjaw moved in, but the newcomer held up a hand. "Not yet." He walked slowly toward. "Harris, you want to play hero? Fine, but you're going to pay for it." Harris didn't blink. "You think you scare me? I've seen worse men than you buried in unmarked graves." The man's smirk faded. "The difference is, detective, no one will bother to bury you." A sharp whistle echoed from the far side of the cannery. One of the guards jogged over, whispering something urgent. The newcomer frowned, then looked back at Harris. "Lucky you, it seems I've got more pressing matters tonight." He turned to Scarjaw. "Dump him. Somewhere he'll think twice about coming back." The two guards grabbed Harris by the arms, hauling him toward the exit. Outside, the night air felt colder, sharper. They dragged him down a dirt path toward the riverbank. Halfway there, Harris drove his elbow into one man's ribs, wrenching free and shoving the other into the mud. Scarjaw came at him, but Harris ducked under the swing, sending both of them crashing toward the river's edge. The three of them grappled in the wet dirt until Harris got his hands on a loose length of pipe. One hard swing, and Scarjaw went down, clutching his shoulder. The other guard staggered to his feet, but Harris didn't wait. He sprinted toward the road. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Harris waved his arms, and a beat-up delivery van skidded to a stop. The driver, wide-eyed, yelled, "Get in." Harris jumped in, slamming the door. "Drive." As they tore away from the cannery, Harris looked back to see the newcomer watching from the shadows. Hands in his coat pockets, face unreadable. The city lights reappeared ahead, and Harris felt the adrenaline start to fade, replaced by the weight of what he'd just learned. This wasn't over. Not even close. He pulled out his phone and called the same number as before. "It's worse than we thought," he said. The voice on the other end was calm. "Then we do it the hard way." Harris leaned back in the seat, rain tapping against the windshield, and allowed himself the faintest smile. "The hard way it is." Outside, the city loomed ahead, full of shadows, and Harris was ready to walk right into them. The rain had just started when Detective Harris stepped out of his car, the wipers still swiping furiously against a windshield streaked with city grime. Across the street, the glow of a flickering sign read, "Marley's Diner." Inside, the late night crowd was thinning. Just a few regulars hunched over coffee cups and one waitress wiping down the counter. Harris pushed the door open, the bell above it giving a tired jingle. The smell of burnt coffee and fried onions wrapped around him like an old coat. He took a seat in a corner booth where he could see the door, the counter, and the reflections in the rain-streaked window. The waitress, a woman in her late 20s with a tired smile, approached. "Coffee?" she asked. "Black," Harris said, "and keep it coming." She nodded and walked off, the sound of her sneakers soft against the worn tile. Harris loosened his tie, eyes scanning the room. Something felt off. Not danger exactly, but a quiet wrongness he'd learned not to ignore. 2 booths over, a man in a leather jacket sat with his back to the wall, hands around a chipped mug. He wasn't drinking, just watching. Their eyes met briefly, and the man's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile or a warning. Harris didn't react. Years on the job had taught him that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was acknowledge danger. The waitress returned with the coffee, setting it down without a word. Her hands trembled slightly. Harris looked up. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a long night." He sipped the coffee, bitter, burned. exactly as expected, and kept his gaze steady on the man in the leather jacket. Outside, a black sedan rolled to a slow stop in front of the diner. Its engine stayed running. Harris's gut tightened. He'd seen that kind of patience before, predators circling without rushing the kill. The man in the leather jacket glanced toward the window, then back at Harris. This time, the smile was unmistakable. The waitress leaned in slightly, her voice low. "You might want to finish that coffee fast." "Why's that?" Harris asked. "Because things tend to break in here when certain people show up." She sighed, flicking her eyes toward the sedan. Harris set his cup down slowly. "What's your name?" "Maya." "All right, Maya. Do me a favor and step back a bit." She did, just as the diner's door opened and two men in dark coats stepped inside, shaking off the rain. They scanned the room, their eyes passing over Harris before moving toward the man in the leather jacket. Harris shifted slightly in his seat, his right hand brushing against the inside of his coat close to the grip of his sidearm. The two newcomers slid into the booth with the leather-jacketed man. Words were exchanged in tones too low for the rest of the diner to hear. Harris watched their hands, their eyes, the slight tension in their shoulders. Something was being decided right there in front of him. Maya moved behind the counter, pretending to check the coffee machine, but glancing at Harris. In the reflection of the chrome panel, the man in the leather jacket finally looked away from Harris, leaning toward the others. "It's handled," he said, just loud enough for Harris to catch. Harris didn't know if the words were meant for the men at the table or for him. Either way, the night had just shifted. The black sedan outside revved once, the sound deep and deliberate, before idling again. Harris took one last sip of coffee. "Guess I'm not getting dessert," he muttered under his breath. Maya's voice cut through the quiet. "Detective." Harris glanced up. She was pale now, her eyes darting toward the door. One of the men from the booth had stood up and was walking straight toward him. Harris stayed seated, his posture relaxed but ready. The man stopped at the edge of the booth. "You're in my seat," he said flatly. Harris let the silence stretch before answering. "Don't see your name on it." The man's jaw tightened. "Get up." Harris leaned back, smiling faintly. "Why don't you make me?" The man's hand twitched toward his coat pocket. Harris's voice stayed calm. "That's a bad idea." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the man stepped back, muttering something Harris didn't catch, and returned to his booth. The tension didn't leave the room. It just settled. Thicker now, waiting. Outside, the stand's headlights cut briefly through the rain as another figure stepped out, his silhouette sharp against the wet pavement. Harris knew that silhouette. And if he was here, things were about to get a whole lot worse. The streets thinned as Harris drove deeper into the industrial district, where the streetlights worked only half the time and the road markings had faded years ago. Puddles reflected streaks of neon from a distant gas station sign, and somewhere in the dark, a dog barked once, then went silent. He slowed as a familiar warehouse came into view, one he'd seen in case files, always tied to shady shipments, but never officially nailed down. Tonight, the corrugated steel walls glistened under the rain, and a single truck idled at the loading bay. Harris killed his headlights a block away and coasted into the shadow of an abandoned storage unit. He cut the engine and listened. Faint voices carried on the damp air, sharp, impatient, moving in and out of earshot. He stepped out, boots splashing in shallow water, and moved toward the side of the warehouse. Keeping low, a cracked window offered a glimpse inside. Crates stacked high, a table with papers scattered across it, and three men hunched over something Harris couldn't see. One of them broad-shouldered, wearing a dark knit cap, slammed a fist on the table. "We're behind schedule," he snapped. "He wants it moved before sunrise." Another voice, calmer but colder, replied, then we work faster. Harris scanned the room for the newcomer from the diner, but didn't spot him. That alone made the detective's gut twist. If the man wasn't here, it meant he was somewhere else, setting something else in motion. He ducked back from the window, just as headlights swept across the far side of the building. A second truck rolled up, its tires hissing on wet asphalt. 4 more men jumped out, carrying what looked like heavy duffel bags. Harris's pulse quickened. If those bags were what he thought, they weren't here for any legal reason. He slipped closer, hugging the shadows, and caught sight of the open bay door. Inside, the duffels were being unzipped, revealing bundles wrapped tight in black plastic drugs. Weapons? Either way, it was enough to bury half the city's criminal underbelly. If he could prove it. Harris reached for his phone to snap a few shots, but the rain made the touchscreen slick. By the time he got the camera open, one of the men had turned toward the door. "Hey!" the man shouted. "Someone's out there!" Harris ducked behind a stack of pallets, just as a flashlight beam cut through the rain. "Check the side." Another voice ordered. Footsteps splashed closer. Harris gripped the small revolver in his coat pocket, keeping it low. The beam swept past once, twice, then paused. "It's nothing," the first man muttered. "Just rain hitting the, Loud metallic clang erupted from somewhere deeper in the yard. Every head turned toward it. Harris didn't waste the distraction. He moved, fast but silent, putting more distance between himself and the searchers. He rounded the far corner of the warehouse and found a rusted service door. Locked, but the frame was old. 2 hard shoves, and it gave way with a squeal. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the smell of oil and mildew. He moved quickly, finding himself in a side hallway that led toward the main floor. Voices echoed ahead. "Make sure it's loaded in the right order. He doesn't like delays." Harris eased forward until he had a clear angle on the operation. He counted 8 men now, moving with practiced efficiency. Whatever this shipment was, they'd done it before. A shadow fell over the scene. Harris's gaze lifted to a metal catwalk above, where the newcomer from the diner now stood, surveying. Everything like a conductor watching an orchestra. The man leaned on the railing, speaking down to the crew. "By sunrise, this city forgets this shipment ever existed." "Understood?" Harris ducked back into the hallway, his mind racing. This was bigger than a threat in a diner. This was an operation, and he'd just stepped right into it. Harris knew. He couldn't stay inside the warehouse long. Too many eyes. Too many exits he didn't control. He slipped back out through the service door, letting it settle without a sound, and moved toward the far edge of the lot. The rain had eased into a fine mist now, and the whole block felt quieter, more dangerous. He crouched behind an old forklift, pulling out his phone to call it in. But before he could dial, the faint crunch of gravel made him freeze. Someone was coming around the corner. Harris slid the phone away and gripped his revolver, waiting until the shadow emerged, a man in a buzz. Rain-slicked jacket. Scanning the darkness. The man stopped, head tilting like he'd heard something. Harris held his breath. After a long pause, the man moved on, his footsteps fading toward the loading bay. Harris let the tension bleed out of his shoulders and headed toward his car. But as he reached the alley, a voice called out behind him, "Detective!" He turned slowly. The newcomer from the diner stood there, hands in his coat pockets, like they were meeting by accident. "You've been busy," the man said. "Just out for a walk," Harris replied. "In the rain? Near my warehouse?" The man's tone was light, but there was iron underneath. Harris shrugged. "Coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidences," the man said, stepping closer. "You're poking at things you don't understand." "I understand enough," Harris said evenly. "Do you? Because right now, you're standing in the kind of place people disappear from." Harris kept his expression flat. "You trying to scare me?" The man smiled faintly. "I don't try.